Right now, as you listen to this, your eyes are adjusting to the dark. Maybe you have already closed them. Maybe the room around you has gone soft and shapeless, the corners dissolving, the ceiling somewhere above you that you can no longer quite see. You are resting inside a mystery that has not been solved in 400 years. The universe contains 2 trillion galaxies. Not 2 billion, 2 trillion. If you tried to count them one at a time, naming one every second and never once stopping to sleep, you would still be counting more than 60,000 years from now. And each of those galaxies holds hundreds of billions of stars of its own. Now hold all of that light in your mind for a moment, because if you take those numbers and run the mathematics forward, and physicists have very carefully, something strange happens. Every single line of sight leaving your eyes, in every direction, should eventually land on the surface of a star. There should be no gaps anywhere. The entire sky, at midnight as much as at noon, should be burning at the same temperature as the face of the sun, roughly 6,000 degrees, bright enough to melt stone into vapor. And yet, it doesn't. You are lying in the dark. The sky above your roof is black and cold and quiet, exactly as it is every night of your life. That contradiction is one of the oldest riddles in the history of science. And here is the part almost no one gets right. When most people hear it explained, they are handed the wrong answer. The popular answer, the one printed in most textbooks, is that the universe is expanding, stretching the light of distant galaxies into wavelengths too long for the eye to catch. That is not entirely wrong, but a British cosmologist named Edward Harrison spent decades on this exact question, and he concluded that the expansion is not the main reason at all. The real reason reaches much further back, all the way, in fact, to the beginning of time. So here is what we are going to do tonight. We are going to build the universe up from almost nothing, slowly, one piece at a time, until the darkness finally makes sense. Not because the physics is hard, but because the true reason the sky is dark is stranger and quieter than nearly anything you have ever been told about space. A few things to carry with you as we go. In February of 1848, an American writer named Edgar Allan Poe stood up at the New York Society Library and delivered a lecture. Not a poem, a theory of the entire cosmos. He argued, in plain and careful prose, that the night is dark because the universe had a beginning, and the light from its farthest reaches has simply not had enough time to arrive. He was right. The physicists would not catch up to him for more than half a century. And then there is this, a spacecraft called New Horizons, drifting more than 4 billion miles from home, out past the orbit of Pluto, sitting in the darkest, emptiest quiet any human instrument has ever sampled, turned its camera on the void in September of 2021 and measured the faint background glow of the whole universe. Astronomers added up every known galaxy, every catalogued point of light. They could account for only half of what the spacecraft saw. Something out there is shining as brightly as every galaxy we have ever counted, all over again, and no one can say what it is. We will come to all of it, in time. If these slow walks through the dark are something you would like more of, you can follow Gravity of Sleep, and another one will be waiting here for the next night the quiet finds you. For now, there is nothing to do and nowhere to be. Stay exactly where you are. Let your shoulders come down. Let your jaw unclench. None of this needs to be held onto. Let it move through you at whatever pace it wants. Get comfortable. Let's begin. So we begin not with the answer, and not even with Olbers, the man whose name this puzzle now wears like a borrowed coat. We begin with something much smaller and much older. One person standing outdoors on a night far darker than any you have ever seen, looking up. Because here is the thing that will stay with you if anything does tonight. The strangeness of this question is not only in how hard it is to answer, it is in how old it is. This is a child's question, when you strip away the mathematics. Why is it dark when there are so many lights? A child could ask it, lying on their back in the grass, half asleep, the way you are half asleep now. And for 400 years, some of the sharpest minds our species has ever produced took that child's question seriously, tried to answer it, failed, and handed it forward, each one a little quieter than the last, to whoever came next. So let the numbers you heard a moment ago rest for a while. The 2 trillion galaxies, the 200 billion trillion stars, set them down beside you in the dark. None of the people we are about to meet knew those numbers. Not one of them. They argued about the darkness of the night sky with almost nothing in their hands. And that is what makes their part of the story so gentle and so human. They were reaching for something enormous with a candle. Go back then, back past the telescope, back before anyone had turned a good lens on the heavens in earnest. Go to England, to somewhere around the year 1576. There was a man named Thomas Digges, born 1546, gone by 1595. And Thomas Digges had taken up a dangerous idea. The idea belonged to Copernicus, and it was this: the Earth is not the still center of everything. The Earth moves. It swings around the sun, like everything else. That thought could get you into trouble in those years. It unseated the world from under people's feet. But Digges did something braver still. Most who accepted the moving Earth still kept a comfortable wall around it all, a great outer sphere with the stars fixed to its inside like nail heads, and everything safely enclosed. Digges took the wall away. He scattered the stars outward, on and on, with no edge, no shell, no boundary at the far side of things. He was, as far as we can tell, the first man in England to print a picture of the cosmos with no outer wall at all, the stars simply going, and going, forever. And the moment he did that, the moment he let the stars run out to infinity, he saw the trouble. If they truly go on without end, if there is a star in every direction no matter how far you follow the line, then why is the sky not solid with them? Why is there any gap between the lights at all? He noticed it, he wrote near it, and then, having no way to solve it, he let it lie. Not the answer, only the first faint sense that something did not add up. Now feel how quiet that is. One man, 4.5 centuries ago, standing in a cold English night with no instrument but his own eyes, catching the edge of a problem that spacecraft still cannot fully close. There is nothing you need to do with that. Just let it settle. Let your breathing slow around it. Then move forward a single generation, to the year 1610, and here the question passes into the hands of Johannes Kepler, one of the great figures in the whole long history of watching the sky. Kepler looked at the very same darkness, the same black gaps between the stars, but he read it the opposite way. Where Digges had let the universe run out to infinity and felt the trouble arrive, Kepler used the trouble to slam the door on infinity altogether. His reasoning was simple, and in its way beautiful. If the universe truly went on forever, filled everywhere with stars, then the night would not be dark. It would blaze. So the night, he argued, is your proof. The darkness overhead is the evidence, right there, free for anyone to check, that the universe must be finite, that it must have a wall after all, an edge, a boundary that keeps the stars from being infinite in number. To Kepler, the dark sky was not a mystery to be solved. It was an answer already given. The night was telling you the universe is not endless, and you had only to listen. Sit with how strange that is for a moment. 2 brilliant men, 1 generation apart, looking at the exact same thing, the plain dark sky that you could see from your own window right now if you rose and pulled the curtain. And one of them read it as a problem, and the other read it as a solution, and both of them, in different ways, were circling a truth that neither could reach. That is what this question does to people. It is a mirror. What you already believe about the size of everything decides what you see when you look up. The candle passes on again, into the 1700s now, and into the age when this child's question first grew a spine of real mathematics. Two names carry it through that century. One is Edmund Halley, in England. The other is Jean-Philippe Loy de Chezeaux, and what they did, each in his own way, was to stop merely wondering and start counting. They imagined the stars arranged in shells around us, a near shell, close by, holding a certain number of stars, then a farther shell, wider, holding more, then a farther one still, and they followed the arithmetic outward, shell after shell, to see whether the light really did pile up the way the worry suggested. This is the moment the question stops being a feeling in the chest and becomes a sum on a page. It is the first time anyone tries to pin the darkness down with numbers rather than with intuition. We will come back to exactly what those shells do and why they betray us so completely a little later tonight. For now, it is enough to know that the arithmetic did not rescue anyone. The trouble held. Under proper mathematics, the sky still refused to be as dark as it plainly is, and only now, after Digges, after Kepler, after Halley and Chezeaux, after nearly 250 years of the question being passed from hand to hand, do we finally arrive at the man whose name it wears. Heinrich Wilhelm Matthias Olbers. Born 1758, gone by 1840. And here is a small, tender detail that is easy to love. Olbers was not, by his day work, an astronomer at all. He was a doctor, an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist, a man who spent his daylight hours bent close over the human eye, over pupils and lenses and the delicate machinery of sight. And then, when the sun went down and his patients went home, he climbed to the top of his house in the German port city of Bremen, to a small observatory he had built for himself, and he turned that same attention from the eye that receives the light to the sky that sends it. On the 7th of May, in the year 1823, Olbers set the question down again in writing, in a work whose title translates as On the Transparency of Space. He laid out the puzzle cleanly. If the universe is filled endlessly with stars, the night should be ablaze. It is not. Something is wrong with the picture, and he offered his own answer for why, an answer we will come to shortly, an answer that feels so reasonable when you first hear it, that it is almost a shame to learn it cannot be true. But notice what has just happened. Olbers did not discover this. You have watched, tonight, 3 separate waves of thinkers reach it before him. He was not the first to feel it, nor the first to write it, nor the first to count it. If anything, he was one of the last to arrive at a party that had already been running for 2 centuries. And yet, through some quiet accident of history, of timing, of who was read and who was remembered, his is the name that stuck to it. To this day, in every textbook, the puzzle of why the night is dark is called Olbers' paradox. The eye doctor from Bremen who came late got the label, and Digges and Kepler and the rest slipped into the footnotes. There is no lesson you need to draw from that. It is only a small, human irony, the kind the history of science is quietly full of. A name lands where it lands, but it does tell you something about the size of what we are dealing with. This was not one clever person's riddle, solved and shelved. It was a question so deep and so stubborn that it outlived generation after generation of the people who tried to close it. It was still open when the wall around the stars came down, still open when the mathematics arrived, still open when the eye doctor climbed his stairs in Bremen and wrote it down one more time, and it would stay open still. Because Olbers, like every good scientist, could not leave a puzzle lying there without reaching for a way out. He had an idea. A plausible, sensible, almost obvious idea for where all that missing starlight had gone. It was the kind of answer that lets you sleep, and for a while it did let people sleep. The trouble was that it was wrong, and the way it was shown to be wrong is one of the loveliest small turns in this entire long story. A turn that takes something meant to hide the light and reveals that it can only ever give the light back. Here is the idea he reached for, and you can feel why it must have seemed like enough. Space, Olbers supposed, is not perfectly empty. Between you and the most distant stars there has to be something. thin drifts of dust, cold clouds of gas, dark, unshining matter in the oldest and plainest sense of those two words. Simply stuff that does not glow. And if the light of the farthest stars has to cross all of that on its long way to your eye, then surely, somewhere in that immense passage, the dust drinks it in. The farther the star, the more dust its light must swim through, and the more of it is quietly swallowed before it ever arrives. The deep sky stays dark in this picture, not because there is nothing out there, but because a veil hangs between you and everything. It is a soft answer. You can almost hear the relief folded inside it. The stars are all still there, uncountable, burning in their billions upon billions, and something gentle and neutral drifts in front of them, sponging up the excess, keeping the night quiet enough to lie beneath. It asks nothing frightening of you. It lets the universe stay endless, and lets the sky stay calm at the same time. Sleep under that idea and it holds. For the better part of a century, people did exactly that. And then the whole thing comes undone by one simple truth. The kind of truth a drowsy child could almost feel in the dark, though it took a careful astronomer to say it out loud. It was the Englishman John Herschel who pressed on the weak place. Think about what it actually means for dust to absorb starlight. The light does not vanish. Light is energy, and energy is not destroyed by being swallowed. It becomes warmth. The dust that drinks the light of 1 trillion stars must grow warm, and a thing that grows warm begins, in time, to glow. Leave that dust in the flood of all that starlight, not for a year, not for 1,000 years, but for the long, slow ages the universe has to spend, and it heats and heats until it reaches the very temperature of the stars that are feeding it. And at that temperature, it does exactly what they do. It shines. So the veil cannot hide the light. It can only hold it for a while, and then give every last drop of it back, glowing in the end just as fiercely as the stars it was meant to conceal. The dust does not darken the sky. Given enough time, the dust becomes the sky. The one thing summoned to explain the darkness turns out to be, quietly, another lamp. Let that settle for a moment. You do not need to hold on to it, or file it away, or remember it in the morning. Just notice how gently the escape hatch swings shut, and how the old question stands back up, entirely unhurt, and waits. Now the strange part. The next real step forward did not come from an observatory at all. It came from a poet. On the 3rd of February in 1848, in a reading room of the New York Society Library, a man stood up to deliver a lecture on the nature of the entire universe. His name was Edgar Allan Poe. He is remembered for other things, for the raven at the chamber door and the beating of a hidden heart and a life that frayed at every edge. And yet on that cold winter evening he reached out and touched the answer that trained astronomers had been circling for centuries. Olbers had been gone for 8 years by then, his dust already failing him, and here was a poet, with no telescope and no equations, saying the thing plainly. Poe's idea was this. Perhaps the reason the spaces between the stars look empty is not that they are empty, but that the light from whatever fills them has not arrived. In his own words, the only way to comprehend the voids our telescopes find in every direction would be by supposing the distance of the invisible background so immense that no ray from it has yet been able to reach us at all. Rest on that phrase the way he must have said it. No ray from it has yet been able to reach us. Not that the far reaches are dark, that their light is still on its way, still crossing the gulf, still coming. He was proposing, in the soft language of a prose poem, that the universe had a beginning, and therefore an edge to what we can see, a horizon beyond which the light has simply not had time to travel. Let your shoulders soften with that. A man who is remembered for terror and grief lay down, almost as an afterthought, the calmest and truest thing anyone had yet said about the dark above your window. The astronomers would need another 50 years, and a great deal of hard mathematics to arrive where the poet had already been standing. The mathematics came in 1901, from a man you may know by the temperature scale that carries his name, Lord Kelvin. In a paper with a title as heavy as its subject, On Ether and Gravitational Matter Through Infinite Space, he did something almost humble. He counted. He asked plainly whether the stars of our own Milky Way, spread across the whole dome of the sky, actually add up to enough glowing surface to cover it. And the answer, when he worked it all the way through, was no. There are simply not enough of them. Even without any notion of an expanding universe, even before anyone knew the cosmos was growing at all, the raw arithmetic of stars and distances said the night had every right to be dark. The sky is not paved end to end with suns. Between every star your eye can find, there is room. And past that room there is more room, and the rooms do not fill. That was the first answer that truly held, but it was not yet the whole of it, and the man who had finished the counting had not yet stepped into this story. His name was Edward Harrison, and he would take up the question in 1964 from a university in Massachusetts with the sharpest tools any of these thinkers had ever held. He would not be satisfied with counting the surfaces of stars. He would count their energy. He would ask not whether there are enough stars to cover the sky, but whether all the stars that have ever burned, across every galaxy there is, have poured out enough total light in the entire history of the universe to set that sky on fire. And the answer he would find is the quiet hinge on which this whole long night turns, because it was never really about the dust, and never only about the distances, and never simply about the counting of surfaces. The truth waiting at the bottom of 400 years of this one question is smaller and stranger than any of them guessed. The night is dark not because the universe is empty, and not because a veil hides its fire, but because the universe is young, and the light of nearly everything it holds has not yet had the time to reach you. Let that settle for a moment, the way you would let a heavy blanket settle over you before sleep. It is the strangest of all the answers, and the one that took the longest for anyone to say out loud. For 400 years the question had passed from one mind to the next, and every mind that held it reached for something to put between you and the fire. Dust, said one of them. Distance, said another. Too few stars to go around, said a third. Each answer was clever, and each answer was partly true, and none of them was the whole of it. And then a man sat down at a university in Massachusetts in the year 1964, and he did something none of the others had quite thought to do. His name was Edward Harrison. He was a cosmologist, a professor of physics and astronomy, and he decided he would stop counting the stars and start counting their light. Think about how simple that shift is, and how strange that no one had truly finished it before. The old thinkers had asked whether there were enough stars to tile the sky, whether there were enough burning surfaces to cover every gap. Harrison asked a colder, quieter question. He asked how much energy all the stars that have ever existed could possibly have made. Not how many they are, how much they have burned. He took every star in every galaxy, all the fire there is and all the fire there ever was, and he added up the total light poured out across the whole life of the universe. And then he compared that total to the amount of light it would take to fill the entire sky, in every direction, edge to edge, with the brightness of a stellar surface. And what he found was that the two numbers do not meet. They are not even close. The stars, all of them together, across all of time, have simply not made enough light to set the sky on fire. There is not enough fuel in all of creation to do it. The bonfire the mathematics demanded was never lit, because the wood to build it does not exist. Rest on that, because it undoes something you have probably been carrying without knowing it. Most people, when they hear at last why the night is dark, are told a single tidy word. Expansion. The universe is stretching, they are told, and the light is stretched thin, and that is why the dark holds. And that answer is real, and we will come to it, and it does its part. But it is not the main reason, and Harrison was the one who made that plain. The night is not mostly dark because the universe is growing. The night is mostly dark because the universe is young. It has only had about 13.8 billion years to shine. That is the whole age of everything, the entire span since the beginning, and it sounds like forever, and against a human life it is. But it is a finite forever. It is a clock that started. And in that finite time, the stars have not burned long enough, and there have not been enough of them to drown the dark. You do not need to hold the arithmetic. You only need to hold the shape of it. There has not been enough time, and there is not enough light. That is the flaw beneath the whole mystery. Harrison would spend the rest of his life turning that finding over. More than 20 years later, in 1987, he gathered it into a book published by Harvard University Press, and he gave it a title that is almost a lullaby in itself. Darkness at Night, a riddle of the universe. He understood that he had not solved a small technical puzzle. He had answered the oldest question a child asks when the lights go out, and the answer he found reached all the way down to the birth of time. And here is where the finite age of the universe stops being a date in a book and becomes something you can almost feel against your skin. Because a universe with a beginning is a universe with a horizon. Light is fast. Light is the fastest thing there is. Faster than anything you will ever see move. So fast that on the scale of your room, it may as well be everywhere at once. And still, it is not fast enough. Light takes time to cross a distance, always, without exception, and if the universe is only about 13.8 billion years old, then light has only had 13.8 billion years to travel, which means there is a distance beyond which no light has reached you yet. Not because it is not out there, not because the stars are not shining, but because the light left too late, and the road is too long, and it is still on its way, somewhere out in the dark between here and there, and it has not arrived. That distance has a size, and the size is difficult to hold, so let me set it down slowly. The edge of everything you could possibly see, the farthest that light has been able to travel to reach you, sits about 46.5 billion light years away in every direction. A light year is the distance light covers in a single year, running at that impossible speed, never resting, never slowing, for 365 days. Picture that thread of light unspooling for 1 year, and understand how long it already is. Now lay 46.5 billion of those threads end to end, and you have the radius of the visible universe, the wall past which no message has yet come. There is no unit from your life that survives the trip. The longest drive you have ever taken, the distance across your whole country, the distance to the moon, the distance to the sun, all of it collapses to nothing against a single one of those threads. And there are 46.5 billion of them stacked between you and the edge. The number is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be surrendered to. Let it be too big. That is the correct response. Let it pass through you and out the other side, and let your shoulders drop while it goes. So when you lie there and look up into the dark, you are not looking at emptiness. You are looking at distance that light has not yet crossed. Every black patch between the stars is a place where there is almost certainly something shining. A galaxy, a swarm of galaxies, fire upon fire, and the light of it is real and it is on its way, and it simply has not covered the road in time to land in your eye tonight. The dark is not absence. The dark is a delay. The dark is the universe being younger than it is wide. And now hold the thing that Harrison's number quietly saves you from, because it is the gentlest kind of terror. Imagine, just for a breath, that the old mathematics had won. Imagine there had been enough stars and enough time, and the shells of light had stacked the way the equations said they should. Then every single point on the sky, every place your eye could turn, would be filled with the surface of a star. The whole dome above you would blaze with the brightness of the sun, not in one spot but everywhere, from every direction at once. There would be no gap to rest your gaze in. There would be no shadow anywhere on Earth, because shadow needs a dark direction to fall toward, and there would be none. There would be no cool side of anything. There would be no night. The ground would glow, the walls would glow, the inside of your closed eyelids would glow, and you could not shut it out, because it would come from all sides with no edge to hide behind. Your body would have no signal to sleep by. The soft dark that is wrapping you right now, the thing that lets your breathing slow and your muscles let go, that dark would not exist. There would be no such thing as evening. There would be no such thing as this. And so the very stillness you are lying in, the darkness at your window and the darkness on your ceiling and the darkness behind your eyes, is not a small thing and not an empty thing. It is the mercy of a young universe. It is the gift of a cosmos that has not yet had time to fill itself with fire. The dark that is holding you tonight is the same dark that puzzled a poet and an ophthalmologist and a knight of the realm. The same dark that 4 centuries of the sharpest minds could not fully explain. And it turns out to be made of nothing more frightening than time. Not enough time. Light still travelling. Fire still on its way. You can let that be a comfort. You are allowed to. None of this is anything you need to keep. Let the number of years drift off. Let the distance drift off. Let the fact that the sky should be burning and is not simply rest against you like the weight of the blanket, and let it press you down, softly towards sleep. But the young universe is only the floor of the mystery, and Harrison knew it was not the last word, because there is still the matter of the light that does arrive. There is still the fire that did have time to reach you, the oldest light there is, older than any star, and it is here. It is in your room. It is passing through your body as you lie there, and the reason you cannot see it is stranger and older than anything a young universe alone can explain. That light was not stopped by dust, and it was not lost to distance. It was changed. And to understand what changed it, you have to follow it back, all the way back to a wall of fire at the beginning of time. Go back far enough and there were no stars at all. There were no galaxies, no planets, no dust drifting between them. There was only heat, everywhere at once, a fog of pure light and matter so hot and so dense that light could not travel through it. Picture fog on a road at night, the way your headlights vanish into it, the way the beam only lights the fog and never reaches the field beyond. The early universe was fog like that, but the fog was the whole of everything, and the light could not get out. For the first few 100,000 years, the universe glowed and could not be seen, because there was nowhere for the seeing to happen. Every place was inside the fog. And then, about 380,000 years after the beginning, the fog cleared. The universe had been expanding and cooling all that time, the way a room cools after you open a window in winter, slowly, evenly, and at a certain moment it had cooled just enough for the fog to thin, for the particles to settle into the first simple atoms, and for the light to finally travel free. That moment has a quiet name: the surface of last scattering. It is the last thing the light touched before it began its long flight toward you, and on that day the whole universe was still glowing, everywhere, in every direction, at a temperature of roughly 3,000 degrees. Not the cold of space you imagine, the orange heat of a cooling ember, the colour of a star's outer skin. If your eyes had been there to see it, the entire sky, in every direction at once, would have burned the soft red of a fire going out. So the bright sky the mathematics demanded did exist. It was real. It happened. For one moment near the beginning, the whole sky was on fire, exactly as Olbers' shells predicted, as bright and as total as the surface of a star. The paradox was not wrong about the fire. It was only wrong about when, because that light has been travelling ever since. For 13.8 billion years it has been crossing the widening dark, longer than every human life that has ever been lived laid end to end, longer than the whole story of the Earth many times over, and the universe has not stayed still beneath it. Space itself has been stretching the whole way, growing larger in every direction, and the light stretched with it. A wave of light riding on expanding space grows longer the way a line drawn on a balloon grows longer as you blow the balloon up. The peaks spread apart. The colour slides down. What began as the fierce red of 3,000 degrees was pulled, slowly over billions of years, out of red and into the infrared, and out of the infrared and down into the microwave, until its wavelength was no longer a fraction of a hair, but nearly 5 centimeters across, about the width of a small stone you could close inside your hand. And as the light stretched, it cooled. This is the part to hold on to tonight. The fire did not go out. It was not extinguished, not absorbed, not lost. It was pulled thin, stretched across so much space that its temperature fell and fell, from 3,000 degrees at the surface of last scattering, all the way down to 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. That is the temperature of the sky today, in every direction, if you could feel it as it truly is. 2.7 degrees above the coldest cold that is physically possible. The dying red fire of the young universe, chilled by expansion into a whisper you cannot see. That whisper has a name too. We call it the cosmic microwave background, and it fills the entire universe evenly, every cubic inch of it, with no gaps and no edges. In 1964, 2 researchers found it by accident, a faint and steady hiss in their instruments that would not go away no matter which way they pointed, no matter how carefully they cleaned and checked. It came from everywhere. It was the oldest light in existence, arriving at last. And it was the same year, the very same year, that Edward Harrison finished the calculation proving the young universe could not fill the sky with starlight. 2 answers to the same ancient question arriving together. One from a chalkboard and one from the sky itself. Now stay with what this means, because it is stranger than the darkness you started with. Every single line you could draw outward from your dark room, in any direction, straight up through the ceiling, sideways through the wall, does eventually end on something. It ends on that wall of fire, the surface of last scattering, the moment the fog cleared. Olbers was right. Every sight line lands on a glowing surface. There is no truly empty direction in the whole of the sky. Look far enough along any line, and you reach the fire at the beginning of time. But the fire has been redshifted so far, cooled so completely, that when it reaches you it is no longer light your eyes can hold. It arrives as a chill instead of a glow. The sky is not dark because the sight lines miss. The sky is dark because the fire at the end of every sight line has been stretched into a colour the human eye was never built to see. And here is the fact that should press you deepest into the pillow. That cold light is not far away. It is not out there. It is here. It fills the whole universe evenly, which means it fills this room. And it is passing through the window, through the wall, through the blanket, through you. A faint and steady trace of the beginning of everything, moving through your body as you lie still. It has always been touching you. You simply had no eye for it. And it is not faint in the way the darkness makes it seem. Measure the whole energy of the sky, every wavelength, seen and unseen, and this invisible cold fire is the loudest thing in it. It carries roughly 40 times more energy than all the visible starlight of all 2 trillion galaxies added together. The blaze the mathematics promised is real, and it is here, and it is enormous. And it drowns out every star. It only sings in a register below the reach of your eyes, a colour poured out everywhere at once, and felt by no one, the brightest thing in the universe wearing the appearance of the dark. So let the sky be dark, and know now that its darkness is not emptiness. It is fullness in a colour you cannot see. The whole sky is on fire, exactly as they feared it would be 400 years ago. And the fire is simply cold now, and quiet and old. There is nothing you need to do with this. There is nothing to hold, nothing to solve. Let the warmth of the first light pass through you the way it always has, without asking to be seen. Let your breathing slow to meet it. Let your shoulders give up their weight. Let the number 2.7 drift off with all the others. And as that oldest light moves through the dark of your room, gentle and even and older than every star, there remains one last thing the fire cannot account for. One glow at the very edge of everything, measured by a small machine far past the last planet, that no one alive has yet been able to explain. Hold that glow somewhere in the back of your mind for now. It is waiting for us, at the far edge of tonight, past the last planet, in a dark so complete that a small machine kept staring into it long after everyone expected it to find nothing at all. We will reach it. But you are not ready for it yet, and neither, if we are honest, was anyone else. Before that faint light can mean anything to you, you have to understand how much of the universe is already hidden. Not lost, not switched off, not far away in the ordinary sense. Simply beyond the reach of every eye and every instrument that human hands have ever built. Because there is a mistake buried inside the way you picture the sky, and it is such a natural mistake that even the people who measure the heavens for a living slip back into it when they are tired. When you imagine the night, you imagine the stars you can see. A few thousand of them, on a clear night, far from any town. A scatter of light you could almost count, and so the darkness between them feels like the true measure of how empty things are. It is not. The darkness between the stars you can see is crowded. It is not thin. It is not spare. It is packed, corner to corner, with light you were simply never built to receive. Consider what was found in the autumn of 2016. A team led by an astrophysicist named Christopher Consolis, working at the University of Nottingham with colleagues at Leiden and at Edinburgh, sat down to do something that sounds almost childish and is in fact staggeringly hard. They tried to count the galaxies, not the stars, the galaxies. Each one a city of 100 billion suns or more, wheeling in the dark. For most of the last century, the best guess had been something near 100 billion galaxies in the reachable universe, a number pulled from the deep images the Hubble telescope had taken in the middle of the 1990s, when it stared at a single patch of apparent nothing and found it swarming. 100 billion galaxies. That figure alone is already past the edge of what a mind can hold. If you tried to name them, one every second, without sleeping, without stopping, you would die with all but a sliver of them still unnamed. And that was the comfortable number. That was the one everyone had made their peace with. Consolis and his team took the deep Hubble images and rebuilt them in 3 dimensions, slicing the universe into eras. And then they did the harder thing. They reached mathematically for the galaxies the pictures could not show, the ones too faint, too small, too far to leave any mark on the film at all. And when they added those in, the number did not grow a little. It grew tenfold, at least 2 trillion galaxies. 2,000 billion. Rest there for a moment. Let the figure settle into the dark with you without trying to hold on to it. 2 trillion galaxies. If each galaxy were a single grain of sand, you would not have a handful. You would not have a bucket. You would have a beach, and then another, and the count would keep going long after you had stopped being able to imagine the sand at all. And every one of those grains is 100 billion burning suns. Now here is the part that turns the light in the room a shade darker, gently, the way a cloud crosses the moon. Of those 2 trillion galaxies, roughly 90% cannot be seen, not by Hubble, not by anything we have ever launched or built or aimed at the sky. 9 out of every 10 galaxies in the universe are, at this very moment, beyond the power of the entire human effort to detect. We know they are there the way you know a room is full by the sound of it through a wall. We can reason our way to them. We cannot look at them. Their light is too faint and too far and too thinned by distance, and it will stay that way with the instruments we have. So sit with the strangeness of it. The sky you cannot see is not almost complete. It is barely begun. You are looking at 1 galaxy in 10 and calling it the universe. And even that 10th is only the part close enough and bright enough to have reached you. There is one more turn, and it is stranger still, because it runs backward against everything the eye assumes. You would think, wouldn't you, that a universe this old would be thinning out, its galaxies drifting apart, growing sparse and lonely with age, and the space between them is indeed stretching. But the galaxies themselves have gone the other way. Consolis's count found that the early universe, the young universe, was far more crowded than the one you are lying inside of tonight. 10 times more galaxies packed into the same volume of space, back near the beginning. Small ones, most of them. Some no heavier than a single million suns, which for a galaxy is barely a galaxy at all, more a bright smudge of a thing. And then, across billions of years, they did what crowded things do. They fell together. They merged. The large ones drew in the small ones, folded them under, grew heavier and fewer. The galaxy you live in, the Milky Way, is built in part from the remains of smaller galaxies it pulled apart and swallowed long before there was anyone here to name it. So the 2 trillion is not the peak, it is what is left. The universe was fuller of islands once, and it has been quietly consolidating them ever since. And the number we call almost unimaginable is the diminished, thinned out, present-day remainder of something that used to be greater still. You do not need to carry any of this. Let me say that plainly, here in the middle of the largeness, because it is easy to feel the weight of these numbers settle onto your chest and mistake it for something you're supposed to do. There is nothing to do. You are not being asked to comprehend 2 trillion of anything. No one can. The astronomers who found the figure cannot picture it either. They hold it the way you are holding it now, as a word, a shape, a pressure at the edge of thought, and then they let it go and make a cup of tea. Let your shoulders come down from where they have crept. Let the number soften. Let it be true without being heavy. Now bring back the thing from before. The cold fire, the oldest light, because there is a question hiding under all of this counting. And it is the same question that has been walking beside us all night. If the universe holds 2 trillion galaxies, and each galaxy holds 100 billion stars, and the young universe held 10 times more of them still, then where is all that light? It was emitted. Every one of those suns has been pouring out light for as long as it has burned. That light did not vanish. It is still traveling. It is still, in principle, arriving. Gather up all of it, every particle of visible starlight that every galaxy across all of cosmic history has ever sent into the dark, and pool it together into one soft glow spread across the whole sky. And it is faint. That is the quiet astonishment of it. All the starlight ever made, gathered into a single background sheen, is dim. It is real. Instruments can measure it. But set it beside that cold microwave fire from the beginning of everything, the one already moving through your room, and the starlight is the smaller thing by far. The oldest light, the leftover warmth of the Big Bang, carries something close to 40 times more energy than every star in every galaxy combined, has managed to pour into visible light in all the time there has been. The suns are the loud thing, the bright thing, the thing you can see. And still, against the afterglow of the beginning, they are a whisper. 2 trillion galaxies, and their entire visible output is a candle held up beside a furnace you cannot even feel. So the darkness holds. It holds against the math that said the sky should burn. It holds against 2 trillion galaxies. It holds against the 90% we cannot see, and against the 10 times more that used to be. Every layer we peel back has only deepened it. Every count has only confirmed the quiet. The sky should be on fire and it is not, and now you understand that it is not even a matter of too few stars. There are almost incomprehensibly many. It is that their light, spread across a universe this large and this young, arrives thinned to almost nothing, and what does fill every direction is old, and cold, and invisible to you, which should have been the end of it. A closed case. A darkness explained fully, layer by patient layer, from a schoolboy in England to a poet in New York to a spacecraft that had not yet even flown. Every honest measurement agreeing with every other. The sky is dark because the universe is finite and young, its light is thin, and its fire is cold. That should have been the whole answer, and for a while it was. And then a small machine, more than 4 billion miles from where you are lying, out past the orbit of Pluto, in a dark 10 times deeper than anything the great telescopes near Earth can reach. turned its single camera toward the emptiest patch of sky it could find and measured the darkness itself. And the darkness, very softly, refused to add up. The spacecraft is called New Horizons, and it was never built to do this. It was built to fly past Pluto, which it did in the summer of 2015, and then to keep going, out into the cold beyond, where the sun is no longer a disk in the sky but a single brilliant point of light, giving almost no warmth to anything that far away. And out there, more than 4 billion miles from your bed, a distance so vast that a signal travelling at the speed of light takes more than 6 hours to cross it, longer than most of a working day, the darkness is cleaner than any darkness we can reach from home. Near the Earth, even in the emptiest patch of sky, there is a faint haze of dust drifting through our own solar system, lit softly by the sun, a glow that never quite goes away. The great telescopes have to look out through it, the way you would try to see the stars through a lit window. But 4 billion miles out, that haze is behind you. The sky there is roughly 10 times darker than the darkest sky the Hubble telescope can ever reach. It is, as far as anyone has ever managed to arrange, the truest black a human instrument has been allowed to measure. In September of 2021, a small team of astronomers turned the spacecraft's one long-range camera, the same simple eye built to photograph small worlds up close, toward the emptiest region of sky they could find. Not a patch with a bright galaxy in it, not a patch near the pale band of the Milky Way, a patch chosen precisely because there was, as far as anyone knew, nothing there at all. They wanted to measure the leftover glow, the cosmic optical background they call it, the summed light of every galaxy that has ever shone, all of it gathered together into one faint wash across the dark. If you could collect every particle of visible light from every star in every galaxy across all of cosmic history, and spread it evenly across the sky, this is the number you would get. And New Horizons, alone in the deep, was in the one quiet place able to hear it. The work was led by an astronomer named Todd Lauer at a national observatory in Tucson, Arizona, with a colleague named Mark Postman at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, Maryland. They published what they found in the spring of 2022, and what they found was that the darkness was too bright. Not blazing, not anything your eye would ever notice, not anything you would feel lying here in your own dark room. But when they measured the faint glow of the void, and then carefully subtracted every known galaxy, every catalogued source of light that should have added to it, there was still something left over. The background was roughly twice as bright as everything we can name could explain. Half of the glow, give or take, had no known author. Sit with that for a moment, gently, the way you would sit with any strange fact in the dark. For 200 years, the paradox had been a story about too much light, quietly explained away into darkness, too many stars, too bright a sky, and one careful reason after another for why we do not see them. And now, at the far quiet edge of the solar system, the accounting had tipped the other way. There was more light in the emptiness than the 2 trillion galaxies could pay for. Not a flood, just a surplus. A small, patient excess in the dark that no one had ordered and no one could return. And here is where the honest astronomers began, very quietly, to disagree. Because a surplus of light in the deepest black can mean several things, and none of them has yet been ruled out. Perhaps, some said, the count of galaxies is simply still too low. Perhaps there are stars that belong nowhere at all, torn out of their galaxies long ago by collisions and near misses, drifting now through the empty space between the islands of light, too scattered and too faint to gather into any catalogue, and yet numerous enough, all of them together, to add a glow of their own. Homeless stars uncounted, burning softly in the gaps. If that is the answer, then the darkness is brighter than we thought, only because it is fuller than we thought, and the old paradox settles quietly back into its familiar shape. Or perhaps, others said, the extra light is closer to home, and the fault is ours. Perhaps a thin veil of dust within our own galaxy, catching starlight and scattering it forward, has crept into the measurement, a smudge on the lens of the whole solar system that we have not yet fully learned to wipe away. If that is the answer, then there is no mystery out in the cosmos at all, only a correction we have not finished making, and the surplus will shrink to nothing as our instruments grow patient enough to see past it. But there was a third possibility, and it is the one that does not sit still. Some in the physics community wondered whether the extra glow might not come from stars at all, whether it might be the faint exhaust of something invisible. There is a particle, never yet detected, only proposed, thought perhaps to make up part of the dark matter that outweighs every star and every galaxy in the universe several times over. An axion it is called, and if it exists, and if it slowly comes apart over unimaginable spans of time, it might release a whisper of light as it goes, spread evenly through all of space, present in every direction you could ever turn to look. If that is the answer, then the surplus in the dark is not stray starlight, and not a smudge on the lens. It is the hidden mass of the universe itself, quietly decaying, and the darkness above you would be carrying the signature of a thing we have spent decades unable to find. None of these has won. That is the part worth resting on tonight. Not one of them has been proven, and not one has been ruled out. The measurement stands, and the explanations circle it, and the space between them is exactly the size of what we do not yet know. A question that a schoolboy first felt more than 400 years ago, that a poet answered in a lecture hall, that the great physicists seem to close for good with their mathematics and their cold invisible radiation, has opened again, just slightly, at the far edge of the solar system, in the quiet readings of a spacecraft that was only ever meant to photograph one small world and fly on. And so the darkness you are lying in tonight is not quite the settled thing it seemed an hour ago. The old answers still hold. The universe is still finite, still young, its light still thin, its most ancient fire still cold and unseen. But threaded faintly through all of that, in the emptiest black we have ever been able to reach, there is a small, unexplained brightness that we cannot yet account for and cannot yet dismiss. You do not have to decide what it means. You do not have to carry any of it. Let the number rest where it lands. Let the question stay open above you, harmless, unfinished, softly glowing. Because to understand why that faint surplus matters so much, why half a glow in the deep should be enough to unsettle 2 full centuries of careful answers, we have to turn now, slowly, and look again at something we were certain we already understood. Because here is what almost everyone believes, if they have ever paused on this question at all. Ask a person who knows a little astronomy why the night sky is dark, why it is not blazing with the piled up light of 2 trillion galaxies, and very often they will give you an answer that sounds modern, and clean, and finished. They will tell you it is the expansion. They will tell you the universe is stretching, growing wider with every passing second, carrying the distant galaxies away from us, dragging their light out toward longer and redder and fainter wavelengths until it slips below anything your eyes can catch. The light is still out there, they will say. It has only been stretched thin, stretched into invisibility. The sky is dark because the universe is quietly running away from itself. It is a beautiful answer. It is calm, and it is cosmic, and it feels like exactly the kind of thing that ought to be true. And you may be carrying some version of it yourself right now, tucked away somewhere, half remembered, the tidy explanation you would reach for if a child asked you the question in a dark room. Hold it loosely for a moment. You do not need to defend it, because it is not wrong, exactly. It is simply not the main thing. And the man who showed us that was not trying to overturn anyone. He was only doing the arithmetic more carefully and more honestly than it had ever been done before. His name was Edward Harrison, and in the year 1964, working at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, he sat down with the whole problem laid out in front of him and asked a question so simple it had been almost entirely skipped over. Everyone had been arguing about where the light goes. Harrison asked instead whether the light was ever there to begin with, not, is the sky's brightness being hidden from us? But is there even enough brightness in all the stars of all the galaxies to fill a sky in the first place? He added it up. He counted the energy. He took the stars and the galaxies and their real output, their real fires, and he asked whether, even if you ignored the expansion completely, even if you froze the universe perfectly still and let every ray travel to you unstretched and undimmed by any motion at all, there would be enough light to set the whole sky glowing like the surface of the sun. And the answer he found was no. Not close. Not even in the neighborhood of enough. The stars, all of them together, across all the galaxies we can imagine, simply do not produce enough total energy to paint the entire sky bright. There is not enough fire in the whole cosmos to do it. And that changes everything you were told a moment ago. Because if the light was never enough to fill the sky, then the expansion is not the thing saving you from the blaze. There is no blaze being hidden. There is no wall of stolen brightness lurking just beyond the red edge of your vision. The problem was never that the light is being carried away. The problem, the deeper and quieter and stranger problem, is that the light has not yet been made. Sit with that turn for a moment, because it is the pivot this whole night has been walking toward. Not the distance, not the dust, not the redshift, and not the running away of the galaxies. Time and scarcity. Those are the real answers, and they are much closer to home than any of the exotic ones. The night sky is not a curtain drawn across a burning room. It is a room that is still mostly empty and still mostly cold, in a house that was only recently built. Let me say the misconception plainly, because it is worth demolishing all the way down, gently, once and for all. The popular idea goes like this. The universe should be bright. It is dark. The expansion took the brightness away. Every clause of that except the first two is misleading. The universe should be bright only if it were infinitely old and infinitely full of stars that had been burning forever. It is not. It is young. It is finite. It is 13.8 billion years old. And light, for all its speed, is not instant. And in those 13.8 billion years, the stars have simply not had the time, and have never had the sheer quantity of fuel to flood the sky. Take the expansion away entirely, and the sky would still be dark. It would be a little brighter, yes. The most distant light would arrive with its colours intact instead of drained. But it would still be night. That is Harrison's verdict, and it is the thing most people get exactly backwards. The darkness above you is not primarily the fingerprint of a stretching cosmos. It is primarily the fingerprint of a young one. And he was not the first to feel the edge of this, only the first to prove it with cold numbers. More than 60 years earlier, in the year 1901, Lord Kelvin had already done a rougher version of the same accounting. He looked at the stars of the Milky Way, and he asked whether there were simply enough of them, enough glowing surfaces spread across the vault, to cover every last line of sight with the face of a star. And he found there were not. Even without knowing anything about expansion, even without the redshift, even without the Big Bang which nobody had yet dreamed of, Kelvin could already see that the stars were too few and too far apart to tile the sky. The lines of sight ran out into gaps. They ran out into black. The universe, he showed, does not contain the raw material for a bright night. And it never did. Harrison spent much of his life turning that insight over and refining it, and in 1987 he gathered it into a book with a title that says the whole thing in 4 words. Darkness at Night, a riddle of the universe. That is what he called it, and that is what it is. Not a trivia question, not a curiosity for a clear evening, a riddle whose answer, once you finally reach it, tells you something enormous and almost unbearably intimate about the age and the size and the loneliness of everything. The dark is not empty of meaning. The dark is the meaning. It is the universe telling you, in the only language it has, that it is young, and that its fires are thin, and that it has not been burning nearly long enough to fill itself with light. You do not have to hold all of that tightly. Let it settle the way a stone settles through still water, slowly, without a splash. There is nothing here you need to remember by morning, but feel, if you can, how the ground has shifted under the question. An hour ago, the paradox seemed to demand that the sky be on fire, and every answer we tried was a way of explaining where the fire went. The dust would absorb it, Olbers hoped, and it could not. The expansion would carry it off, the modern voice insists, and it mostly does not. All of that assumed the fire was there. Harrison quietly removed the fire. He showed that the sky is not dark because we cannot see the light. The sky is dark because the light, gathered from every star in every galaxy across all of cosmic history, was never bright enough to overcome the dark to begin with. And this is where the loophole opens. The fragile and beautiful loophole, and it is worth pausing on, because it is the kind of thought a drowsy mind can hold and turn over and drift away on. If the darkness is a matter of time, of the universe being too young to have made enough light, then there is a version of the story in which it need not stay dark forever. Give the stars long enough. Give them time beyond anything a human life can measure. Time beyond the age the universe has so far lived many times over. Would the sky, someday, slowly begin to fill? Would the black between the stars, given eternity, at last grow bright? And here the dread comes back in softly, because the honest answer runs the other way. It is not that the sky is waiting to brighten. It is that the sky is already about as bright in visible light as it will ever be. Not because the universe is finished making stars, but because the two things that would fill the sky, more time and more fire, are working against each other. The stars burn. The stars die. A star like our own sun lasts something on the order of 10 billion years and then it is gone. And the universe does not keep them all lit forever waiting for their combined glow to reach us. The fires are not accumulating toward a bright dawn, they are being spent. So the darkness is not a temporary condition that light will eventually overwhelm. It is closer to a permanent one, and the far future, if anything, is darker still. But before we can follow that thread out to its cold and distant end, before we can talk about a night that lasts not billions of years but 1,000 trillion, we have to look at what the universe actually did with the brightest light it ever made, the single greatest blaze in all of history, and understand exactly how it was hidden from your eyes. So here is the strangest part of the whole story, and I want you to take it in slowly, the way you take in a piece of news too large to feel all at once. Lie still for it. Let your shoulders go heavy against the bed. Because what I am about to tell you is not that the night sky is dark. It is that the night sky is not dark at all. It only looks dark to you. Consider what it would actually take for the sky to be truly empty. It would take a line of sight, running out from your eye in any direction you please, that travels forever and never lands on anything. And that, it turns out, is the one thing the universe will not give you. Point anywhere. Point at the blackest patch of sky you can find. The gap between two faint stars where there seems to be nothing whatsoever. Your line of sight does not run on into nothing. It ends. Every single line of sight ends. Not on a star, not on a galaxy. It ends on a wall of light older than any star that has ever burned. Let me take you back to the youngest hours of everything. For the first few 100,000 years after the beginning, the universe was not transparent. It was a fog. It was so hot and so dense that light could not travel in a straight line for more than an instant before it slammed into a free particle and scattered, the way headlights drown in thick fog and go nowhere. There were no stars yet. There was only this glowing, blinding soup, filling all of space at once. And then, about 380,000 years in, the universe cooled just enough. The fog lifted. The particles joined into the first atoms. The fog cleared in an instant across all of space, and for the first time light was set free to fly in a straight line. That released light had a temperature of roughly 3,000 degrees. It was the color of a dull ember, of a sunrise, a soft orange-white glow pouring out of every point in the sky at once. That glow never stopped traveling. It is still traveling now. And because it came from everywhere, It is still arriving from everywhere. This is the thing the old astronomers were reaching for without knowing it. They imagined that if the universe were full enough, every line of sight would eventually land on the surface of a star, and the whole sky would blaze. They were not wrong about the blaze, they were only wrong about the surface. Every line of sight does end on a bright, glowing surface. It is not the surface of a star, it is the surface of the beginning itself, a wall of fire wrapped completely around you in every direction, close in cosmic terms and impossibly far in time. So the sky is not empty, the sky is on fire. It is ablaze from edge to edge, exactly as the paradox demanded, a solid sheet of light with no gaps in it anywhere. And you are lying underneath all of it, and you cannot see a single flicker. How can that be? This is where you have to be careful, because this is the part almost everyone gets slightly wrong, and getting it slightly wrong changes the whole meaning. You may have heard, somewhere along the way, that the night is dark because the universe is expanding, and the expansion stretches the light and carries it away from us. That sounds right. It is repeated often, and it is a half-truth that has hardened into a whole misunderstanding. The expansion did not carry this light away. It did not remove it. It did not send it somewhere you cannot reach. The light is here. It is arriving at you this very second, this very breath, passing through the dark air of your room, passing through the pillow, passing through you. It never left. It was not erased. What expansion did was gentler than erasing, and stranger. Over almost 14 billion years, space itself swelled, and as it swelled it stretched the travelling light along with it, pulling the little ripples of each wave longer and longer and longer. And the length of a light wave is the thing your eye reads as colour. Stretch it a little, and orange becomes red. Stretch it more, and red slides out past the edge of what any human eye can register. Stretch it 1,000-fold, which is what almost 14 billion years of expansion actually does. And that 3,000-degree embolite is pulled all the way down to a temperature of about 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. Its waves stretched from the width of a fingernail to a wavelength of a few centimeters. It is no longer orange. It is no longer visible at all. It has become microwaves. The great fire is still burning in every direction, and your eyes were simply never built to see the color it has become. So the light was not lost, but disguised, not removed, but redshifted below the floor of your vision. And here is the part that I think is the true turn in all of this. The fact that should sit with you as you drift. This hidden fire is not some faint leftover. It is not a whisper. It is by a wide margin the brightest thing in the universe. If you added together every photon of visible light from every star in every one of the 2 trillion galaxies out there, all of it, the entire glowing catalogue of creation, this invisible microwave glow would still outshine all of it by something like 40 times over. The single greatest blaze in the history of everything is not the stars. It is this, and it is pressing on you from all sides right now, and you feel nothing, and you see nothing, and it looks for all the world like an empty black ceiling. We only learnt it was there by accident. In the year 1964, 2 engineers named Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson were working with a large horn-shaped antenna, trying to listen to faint radio signals, and they kept picking up a hiss they could not get rid of. It came from every direction of the sky, day and night, no matter where they aimed. They thought it might be the instrument. They thought it might be interference from the city. At one point, the story goes, they climbed into the antenna and scrubbed out the droppings left by nesting pigeons, certain the mess was to blame. The hiss stayed. It stayed because it was not noise, and it was not pigeons. It was the sound, if you can call it that, of the oldest light in existence, arriving at last as a faint microwave warmth that fills all of space. That very same year, on the other side of the ocean, Edward Harrison was quietly working through his calculation about why there was not enough starlight to burn the sky. The 2 halves of the answer, the missing fire of the stars and the hidden fire of the beginning, arrived in the world in the same 12 months. and almost no one noticed they belonged together. So carry this with you into the dark. The darkness you are lying in has two faces, not one. There is the darkness of the stars, which is real, and which comes from there simply not being enough of them, burning for long enough to fill the sky with their own light. And underneath it there is the other darkness, which is not a darkness at all, but a blaze turned invisible, a wall of ancient light disguised as empty space. Not absence, but concealment. Not nothing, but everything, hidden just past the edge of sight. And yet even this does not close the account, because between you and that ancient wall of fire lies all the light of all the galaxies that ever were. And when astronomers finally sat down to count those galaxies, the number they found was not the number anyone expected. It was far larger, and most of it turns out, we still cannot see at all. For most of the last century, the number the astronomers carried in their minds was already almost too large to hold. They had looked deep, in the middle of the 1990s, through the great mirror of the Hubble telescope, into a patch of sky so small and so seemingly empty that you could have hidden it behind a grain of sand held out at arm's length. And in that speck of nothing they found galaxies. Not one or two. Thousands. They counted them, and they scaled that count up across the whole of the sky, and they arrived at a figure that felt like the edge of what a mind could carry. 100 billion galaxies. Perhaps 120. Each one a city of stars, each star a sun, many of them with worlds turning around them in the dark. 100 billion of those. That was the universe as they understood it, and it was already a number that could quietly stop your breath if you let it settle on you in a dark room. You do not need to hold that number. Let it be there without gripping it. Let your hands rest. Because the number was wrong. Not wrong in the way a mistake is wrong. Wrong in the way an underestimate is wrong. An honest guess made by people looking through the best instrument they had and still not seeing far enough. In the year 2016, on the 13th of October, a team led by an astrophysicist named Christopher Consolis, working at the University of Nottingham, published a new count in a journal called the Astrophysical Journal. And what they did was clever, and a little unsettling once you understand it. They took the deepest images humanity had ever made, the long exposures where the faintest smudges of the early universe finally show themselves, and they rebuilt them in 3 dimensions, sorting the galaxies not just across the sky but back through time, layer behind layer behind layer. And then they did the harder thing. They asked how many galaxies must be there that the telescope simply cannot see. How many lie below the threshold of any lens ever ground? Too faint, too far, too smeared by distance to leave even a smudge on the glass. They modelled those missing multitudes, the ones no exposure however long will ever draw out, and they added them in, and the number they reached was 2 trillion. 2 trillion galaxies. 10 times more than a whole generation of astronomers had believed. 10 times. Take that older figure, that already staggering 100 billion, and understand that it was not the answer. It was a tenth of the answer. The universe, when they finally counted properly, turned out to be 10 times more crowded with islands of stars than the people who had spent their lives studying it had ever dared to think. Rest there for a moment. There is nowhere to be with this. There is nothing to do with it. Just let the size of it move through you, the way the sound of rain moves through a house at night. And here is the part that belongs to the darkness you are lying in. Of those 2 trillion galaxies, roughly 90% cannot be seen. Not with Hubble. Not with any telescope that exists anywhere on Earth or above it. Not tonight. Not with anything humanity has yet built. 90%. For every galaxy we have ever photographed, ever named, ever catalogued and studied and pointed at, there are 9 more out there in the deep that have never registered on any instrument, and may not for a very long time, if ever. They are too faint. Their light is too old and too stretched and too thin by the time it arrives. They are present in the sky above your roof right now, pouring their light down onto you as you breathe, and we cannot see them. The sky is not only darker than it should be, it is fuller than it looks. Almost everything that is up there is invisible to us, and we only know it is there because the mathematics insists on it. So think about what that does to the old paradox. The night sky should blaze. The reasoning went. Because in an endless field of stars, every line you could draw would eventually strike a burning surface. And now here is a universe with 2 trillion galaxies in it, and even that colossal number, even 10 times more than anyone believed, is not enough. It is not enough to fill the sky with fire, because the number of stars, while enormous, is finite. 200 billion trillion of them, give or take, across the entire reach of what we can observe. That is a number with more zeros than you would ever say aloud, and it is still, in the end, just a number. Still countable, still not infinite. And only the infinite could set the whole sky alight. The universe brought 2 trillion galaxies to the question, and the darkness held anyway. That is how much darkness there is to fill. That is how vast the emptiness between the lights truly is. And the crowding was not always like this. This is the strange thing the same study found, and it turns the whole picture on its head. Those 2 trillion galaxies are what remains. In the early universe, when the cosmos was young and small and packed close, there were even more of them, per unit of space, perhaps 10 times more crowded than the sky around us now. Not great grand spirals like the one you live inside. Little ones, faint ones, some of them weighing as little as 1,000,000 suns, which sounds like an unthinkable mass until you remember that a single large galaxy holds hundreds of billions of stars, and then 1,000,000 begins to sound almost small, almost like a village of light adrift in the black. And over the long ages, those little galaxies did what small things drifting close together tend to do. They fell into one another. They merged. They were pulled in and swallowed and folded together, the small feeding the large growing larger by consuming its neighbours, until the crowded early cosmos thinned itself out into the sparser, grander arrangement we see today. The galaxy you are inside, this river of stars we call the Milky Way, is not an original. It is an assembly. It is built from the wreckage and the gathering of countless smaller things that came before it and no longer exist as themselves. The number of galaxies in the universe has been falling, slowly, quietly, for billions of years. You are living in a universe that is emptying, not filling, emptying. The great count is past its peak, and the trend, over deep time, runs only one way, toward fewer lights, further apart. Let that be gentle. There is nothing frightening in it that you need to carry. It is only the shape of time, playing out on a scale so slow that a human life, a human civilization, the whole span of everything anyone has ever done, is less than a single frame of it. You can let your shoulders drop. You can let this be someone else's arithmetic, someone very far away in the future, someone who will never know your name. But follow the trend forward, because this is where the darkness reveals its second face, the one that has nothing to do with distance or with the age of the light. Follow it out past anything the imagination is built for. A star like our sun burns for roughly 10 billion years, and then it is spent. The larger ones go faster, the smaller ones linger longer, but every one of them has an end, a last flicker of fusion, a final release of light. And new stars are still being born, out of gas and dust, and the slow collapse of cold clouds. But the gas is not endless either. It is being used up, and in the far, far future, further from now than the present is from the Big Bang, so far that the number stops meaning anything, roughly 1,000 trillion years from tonight, the last star will burn out. There will be no more of them, no fusion anywhere, nothing left but the cold remnants, the white dwarfs slowly cooling, the dead cinders of neutron stars, the black holes that let nothing go. And on that night, the sky will be dark again, but not for the reason it is dark tonight. Tonight the sky is dark because the universe is young, too young to have made enough light and sent it far enough to fill the void. That is a darkness of not yet. But that final darkness, the one waiting at the end of deep time, will be a darkness of no more. A sky emptied not because the light has not arrived, but because there is no longer any light being made. The same blackness, arrived at from the opposite direction. The universe begins in a darkness of youth, and it will end in a darkness of exhaustion. And in between, in this thin bright window we happen to be alive inside, the stars burn, and even now they are not enough to light the sky. So the darkness above your bed is not one thing. You already knew that. There is the darkness of too few stars, and beneath it the hidden blaze of the ancient light turned invisible. And now, threaded through both, there is this third thing, this slow arithmetic of deep time, the count that rose to 2 trillion and is quietly falling, the fuel that is finite, the last star that has a date, unimaginably distant but real, already written into the physics. Every layer you peel back reveals another beneath it. And you might think, by now, that the account is finally closed, that we have named every reason the sky is dark and can rest. But there is one more thing. Something recent. Something measured not by a theory but by a machine, out past the last planet, in the cleanest dark that human hands have ever reached into. And what it found did not fit. It carries a name that sounds almost tender. New Horizons, a small machine, not much larger than a grand piano, that left the Earth to photograph Pluto, and having done that, simply kept going. It fell outward, past the last of the mapped worlds, into the long quiet on the far side of everything you have ever stood on. By the autumn of the year 2021, it was more than 4 billion miles from the room you are lying in now. That is a distance the body cannot hold. Light itself, the fastest thing there is, needs most of a day to make that crossing, so that when the machine speaks to us, it is already hours into the past by the time we hear it. And out there, that far from the sun, the dark is not the dark you know. It is cleaner. It is emptier. The sky around that little spacecraft is roughly 10 times darker than the darkest sky the great telescopes in orbit have ever been able to reach. That cleanliness is the whole point. Down here, near the sun, we are swimming in stray light. There is dust in our own solar system, faint and everywhere, catching sunlight and glowing softly, a haze we can never fully wipe from the lens. There is the smeared glow of our own galaxy. Every measurement made from close to home is made through that veil. But 4 billion miles out, the veil thins almost to nothing. And so 2 astronomers saw an opportunity that had never existed before. Todd Lauer, working in Tucson, and Mark Postman in Baltimore, took the spacecraft's small onboard camera, an instrument called LORRI, and did something quietly audacious. They pointed it at nothing, at the emptiest patch of sky they could find, and they asked it a very old question in a very new place. When you take away every star and every known galaxy, and all the dust you can name, how much light is left over? How bright, truly, is the dark? You can feel the shape of the answer they expected. By now, you understand it in your body. There should be a residue, a faint, honest whisper of all the galaxies too dim and too distant for any telescope to resolve. The 90 out of every 100 that exist beyond our reach. The summed glow of 2 trillion galaxies, most of them invisible, spread thin across the whole sky, should leave the faintest possible smudge on the darkness. Real, but almost nothing. A candle seen from the far side of an ocean. That is what the arithmetic predicts. That is the light the sky is allowed to have. And before I tell you what the machine actually saw, stay in the dark with me a little longer, because something worth noticing is happening here. Count the reasons, one by one, that the sky above your bed is not on fire. There are so many of them now, and they are all true at once. The universe is too young, and so the light of the farthest things has not had time to arrive. The stars, for all their number, do not carry enough total fire to fill the sky even if you gave them forever. The oldest light of all has been stretched by the expansion of space until it dropped below the reach of your eyes, hiding in a color you were never built to see. The galaxies were once far more crowded than they are now, and their number has been falling for billions of years as they swallowed one another. And threaded beneath all of it, the slow certainty that the fuel is finite, that every star is a fire with an end. Notice what that is. It is not one answer. It is a stack, reason upon reason upon reason, each one alone almost enough, and together overwhelming, all leaning in the same direction, all conspiring to keep the night gentle. And this is the thing that everyday life so kindly hides from you. When you look up on a clear night and see a few thousand faint points scattered on black, it feels like the natural order of a calm and mostly empty world. It feels like nothing needs explaining at all. But the black is not the default. The black is the improbable outcome. The honest expectation, written into the plainest mathematics, is a sky that blazes without seam or shadow, a ceiling of fire in every direction, no night, no rest, no sleep. You are living inside the exception. The darkness that lets you close your eyes is not the absence of a reason. It is the sum of many. And the stack is still growing. Take the deep time you glimpsed a moment ago, and let it open all the way. A star like our sun burns for roughly 10 billion years, and then it is done. Run that forward, not for millions of years, not for billions, but for a span so long the words lose their footing. Roughly 1,000 trillion years from tonight, the last star capable of nuclear fire will gutter and go cold. After that there are no more stars, only their remains. White dwarfs slowly fading, neutron stars going quiet, black holes drifting in a cold that has no bottom. And the sky will be dark then too, in every direction. But for a reason entirely unlike tonight's. Not a young universe waiting for its light to arrive, an old one that has spent everything it had. The same black ceiling, at the beginning and at the end, bracketing a single thin bright window, and you are inside the window, and the window is closing, slowly on a clock you will never see move. That is the deepest floor I can take you to, a darkness before the light could reach us, and a darkness after the light runs out. And between them this brief lit hour we happen to be alive to witness. You could be forgiven for thinking the account is closed now. Every reason named, every layer counted, the beginning and the end both dark, and the middle explained. There is nothing here you need to hold. Let it go. Let the numbers pass through you. Let the weight of 1,000 trillion years rest somewhere it cannot touch your breathing. But go back to the little machine, 4 billion miles out, its camera pointed at the emptiest dark that human hands have ever reached into. It made its measurement. It subtracted the stars. It subtracted every galaxy in every catalogue. It subtracted the dust it could name. And the number that came back did not fall to that faint predicted whisper. It did not settle where 2 trillion galaxies said it should. There was more light in the empty sky than everything we know how to count could explain. A glow with no name on it. A brightness the arithmetic did not order and cannot yet account for. After 400 years, after Kelvin and Harrison, after the young universe and the stretched light and the dying stars, the cleanest dark we ever measured turned out to be holding something back. And no one to this night can tell you what it is. But not knowing what a thing is does not mean no one has guessed. There are names on the suspect list. There are quiet, careful theories, each one an attempt to take that unaccounted glow and fold it back into something we already understand. And tonight, in this last hour before we let the whole question go, it is worth walking slowly past each of them, the way you might walk past a row of closed doors in a house you thought you knew by heart. You do not have to remember which door is which. You do not have to decide anything. Just let them pass by you, one at a time, in the dark. The first guess is the gentlest one, and it is almost a comfort. Perhaps the glow is nothing new at all. Perhaps it is only the galaxies we already know are out there, but cannot quite see. Remember the number. Of the 2 trillion galaxies the universe is thought to hold, something close to 90 out of every 100 are too faint, too far, too smeared by distance for any telescope yet built to pick them out one by one. They are not hidden behind anything. They are simply beyond the reach of our instruments, the way a candle stays real even when it is too far down the road to make out. So the easiest answer to the extra light is that we undercounted, that the catalogues are incomplete, that the missing brightness is just the sum of a great crowd of faint, ordinary galaxies, standing exactly where the theory always said they would stand, only dimmer and more numerous than anyone managed to write down. It is a tidy answer. It asks you to change nothing about the universe, only to admit the obvious, that we have never seen all of it and never will. And for a while it looked like it might be enough. But the people who made the measurement had already thought of this. When they subtracted the known galaxies, they did their best to account for the faint ones too, to estimate the whole invisible crowd below the threshold and take it away as well. And still the number would not come down. Still there was light left over that the faint galaxies, even generously counted, could not seem to fill. So the gentlest door does not quite close. You can lean your weight against it, and it holds most of that weight, but not all of it. Something stays on the other side. The second guess is stranger, and a little lonelier. Perhaps the extra light does not come from galaxies at all, whole and bound and turning, but from stars that have no galaxy left to belong to. When galaxies drift too close, when they pull at each other across millions of years, they do not always merge cleanly. Sometimes the gravity tears stars loose, flings long streams of them out into the space between, and simply leaves them there. Orphan stars. Rogue suns with no home, scattered thin across the enormous dark that lies between one galaxy and the next. No telescope pointed at a galaxy would ever count them, because they are not in a galaxy, they are in the gaps. And if there are enough of them, spread faintly through all that emptiness, their light would appear in no catalogue anyone has ever written, and yet it would still be there, filling the void with a whisper of brightness we never thought to add up. Let that image rest a moment. Whole populations of stars, burning quietly in the middle of nowhere, belonging to nothing. Then let it go. The third guess is the least romantic of them, and for exactly that reason it is the hardest to dismiss. Perhaps there is no cosmic mystery here at all. Perhaps the extra light is local. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is threaded with dust, thin veils of it drifting between the stars. And that dust does not only block light, it scatters it. A little starlight glances off a single grain and turns toward us from an unexpected angle. And if you are trying to measure the faint true glow of the whole distant universe, that scattered local light can lean into your reading and lift it, quietly, without ever announcing what it is. Even 4 billion miles from home, even out past the orbit of Pluto where the sky is 10 times darker than anything the great telescopes near Earth can find, you have not fully escaped your own galaxy's dust. You have only left most of it behind. And most is not all, so it remains possible, honestly and unglamorously possible, that the strange excess is not a message from the far universe at all, but a faint smudge on the lens we were born inside, and that the whole beautiful puzzle dissolves the moment someone learns to measure the dust more carefully than we can today. And then there is the last door, the one at the very end of the hall, and it does not open onto stars, or dust, or galaxies. It opens onto the dark itself. Because most of the mass of the universe is not anything we can see. It gives off no light of its own. It reflects none. It blocks none. We know it is there only by its weight, only by the way whole galaxies turn as though something unseen were gripping them and holding them together. Physicists call it dark matter, and after all these decades they still cannot tell you what it is made of. One of the guesses, and it is only a guess, the story here still very much unfinished, is that it might be built from a particle so light and so faint that no experiment on Earth has ever caught even a single one. A particle that would, very rarely, very slowly, come apart. And in coming apart, let go of one small breath of light. If that were true, and no one is claiming that it is, then the extra glow 4 billion miles out would not be missing stars, or homeless suns, or scattered dust. It would be the sound of the universe's hidden scaffolding, its vast invisible weight, quietly coming undone. One faint photon at a time, everywhere, in every direction. For as long as there has been a universe to hold it, the darkness would not be empty. The darkness would be decaying, and giving off just enough light in the act of it to be caught, if only you travelled far enough from home and stared long enough into the emptiest place you could find. And here is the thing that keeps that last door from feeling absurd. The thing you already learnt tonight. The universe is already full of light we cannot see. The whole sky glows, in every direction, with the stretched out echo of the Big Bang. A radiation that carries something like 40 times more energy than all the visible starlight of every galaxy combined. And yet your eyes register none of it, because it was pulled long ago down into invisible microwaves. We live inside a blaze we cannot perceive, so the idea of one more invisible glow, softer and stranger, leaking out of the dark matter itself, is not a wild leap. It is only the next quiet layer of a universe that has, again and again, turned out to be brighter than it looks and darker than it should be, both at once. You can feel, perhaps, how far we have travelled from where we began. We started with a child's question, the simplest one there is. The one you could ask lying exactly where you are lying now, with the lights off and the ceiling gone to shadow. Why is it dark? And we followed that question through 400 years of patient minds, through the man who gave the paradox his name and reached for the wrong answer, through the poet who guessed it right in a lecture hall while the astronomers were still stuck, through the counting of the stars and the weighing of their light, until at last we held what looked like a finished answer, clean and complete. The sky is dark because the universe is young, because its light is stretched thin, because its stars are too few and too spent to ever set the whole sky on fire. That answer is true. It still holds. Nothing measured in the emptiest dark beyond Pluto has taken it away from you. And yet the cleanest dark we ever reached into would not quite agree with the finished answer. It held a little more light than the arithmetic allowed, a small, stubborn, unaccounted brightness that might be faint galaxies, or homeless stars, or a smear of our own dust, or, if the strangest guess is right, the slow luminous exhale of matter we cannot even see. We do not know which. We may not know for a very long time. And that, in the end, is the shape this question keeps returning to, across every one of its 400 years. Every single time we are sure we have closed it, some finer instrument, pointed at some darker place, comes back holding one more loose thread. So let the answer be almost complete, and let the almost stay open. You do not have to resolve it tonight. No one alive has resolved it. Let the four suspects stand quietly in the dark of their own unknowing, none of them ruled out, none of them proven, and let your shoulders soften, and let the reaching go slack, because there is something else waiting in all of this, underneath the stars and the dust and the decaying dark, something that has less to do with what the sky is made of, and more to do with what it has been trying to tell us all along. From the very first night a person lay back and wondered why the space between the stars was black, and before we let the night close over us completely, that is the last thing worth turning toward. But before we turn all the way toward that, there is one more darkness to name. A second darkness. Not the one pressing softly against your window tonight. Not the young darkness we have spent these hours trying to explain. This other one has not arrived yet. It is still ahead of us, far ahead, further than any number you have ever had to hold, and it is the strangest thing about the whole paradox, because it means the darkness you know and the darkness to come are dark for opposite reasons. Think back over everything the sky has told us. Harrison's answer, the one that finally settled the question, was that the universe is simply too young, not too empty, not too spread out, too young. Stars and galaxies have only had something like 13.8 billion years to pour their light into the void, and in that shorter span, with the energy they actually carry, they cannot begin to fill it. The night is dark because the fire is new. The candles were only just lit. But candles burn down. A star like our sun lives for roughly 10 billion years. That sounds eternal from where you are lying, and in every way that matters to a single human night it is. But it is not forever. One by one, across stretches of time that make 13 billion years look like a single held breath, the stars are spending themselves. The bright, heavy ones go first, fast and violent. The small red ones will smoulder far longer, patient and dim, but they too will fade, and there is no endless supply behind them. The gas that makes new stars is finite, and every generation of them uses a little more of it and hands back a little less. So walk forward with me, gently, no need to grip the numbers. Go forward not 13 billion years, but 1,000 trillion years. Let that figure pass straight through you without trying to picture it, because you cannot picture it, no mind can. 1,000 trillion years from tonight, the last nuclear fire anywhere in the universe will have gone out. No sun, no new suns, only the cold leftovers of stars, white dwarfs slowly cooling toward black, neutron stars, dense and silent, and black holes, patient, drinking down whatever little is left, and the sky then will be dark again, truly dark, in a way it has never once been in all of cosmic history. Not dark because the light has not arrived yet, dark because there is no light left anywhere to send. The young darkness of tonight is a darkness of waiting. That far darkness is a darkness of ending. And between them, between the fire being too new and the fire being all burned out, there is a narrow lit window. A brief, warm age when the stars are actually shining, when the galaxies are actually turning, when someone, somewhere, can lie back and look up and see anything at all. You are inside that window. Right now. Tonight. That is the small, quiet hope folded into all of this, and it is worth holding for just a moment before you let it drift. Of all the ages this universe will ever move through, the vast dark youth before the first star ignited, the vast dark old age after the last one dies, you happen to open your eyes during the one stretch when the lights are on. The sky above your roof is not fully bright, and it will not stay lit forever, but it is lit now, and you are here now to know it. That is not nothing. On most nights of the universe's enormous life, there will be no such thing as a night sky to wonder at, and no one left to wonder. But do not let the hope harden into comfort, because the same window that holds you also closes. The darkness you see when you look up is not a permanent fixture of things. It is a phase. It was another kind of dark before, and it will be another kind of dark after, and the version we have argued over for 400 years, the sky that stays black despite 2 trillion galaxies, is only the darkness of this one particular chapter. The chapter with us in it, and this is where the threads we have followed all night quietly gather. The mathematics that insisted the sky should blaze like the surface of the sun, the dust that could not save it, the poet who guessed the horizon before the physicists could prove it, Kelvin counting the stars and finding too few, Harrison naming the young universe that had not yet had time to burn, the invisible fire of the microwave background, 40 times brighter than all the starlight there has ever been, laid evenly across the whole sky and stretched so far past red that your eyes will never register a single degree of it. The 90 galaxies out of every 100 that no instrument yet built can find, and, out past Pluto, a small spacecraft still holding up a faint glow that all our catalogues cannot account for. One more loose thread. One more open edge. Every one of those was a piece of an answer, and every one of them, followed far enough, turned back into a question. That is the shape of this thing. It does not close, it narrows, and it deepens, and it hands you a darkness that is more explained and more mysterious at the very same time. So here we are, near the end, holding a sky we understand better than any generation before us and still cannot fully account for. We know why it is dark, mostly. We know it will be dark again someday for an entirely different reason. We know it is invisibly full of the oldest light there is. And we know that somewhere in that same darkness, maybe, there is a signal we have not yet learned to read. A faint excess, a slowly decaying particle, a whisper the eye was simply never built to catch. Let all of that settle now. You do not need to carry any of it. Let the numbers loosen their grip and slip away. Let the far future and the deep past drift apart again and leave you here, in the lit window, in the warm and narrow age, with your breathing going slow and the dark of your own room resting easy on your skin. Because the darkness overhead was never only a puzzle about stars and distance and time. From the very first person who lay where you are lying and asked why the space between the lights is black, it has been asking something back. Something about how brief a moment we are given to look, and how much of everything stays hidden from the looking, and why a creature made of borrowed starlight should find itself awake, for one short age, under a sky it can almost explain. That is the thing waiting underneath all the physics. And that, softly, is where we turn last. So let us turn there, gently, and stay a while. Not to answer it. The answer was never the point of tonight, and it may not be the point ever, because here is the strange, quiet gift buried under all of this. After 4 centuries of some of the finest minds our species has managed to grow, after Digges in his field and Kepler with his edges, after Halley and Chezeaux with their careful sums, after Olbers and his hopeful dust, after a grieving poet alone at a lectern, after Kelvin counting the stars one imagined shell at a time, after Harrison's patient arithmetic, after a small machine carried our eyes past the last planet to stare into the emptiest dark we have ever found, the question is answered, and it is not answered. Both of those are true at the same time, and you can hold them both without choosing. We know why the sky is dark. We truly do, and you have earned that knowledge tonight. The universe is young, only about 13.8 billion years old, and light is patient but slow, and there simply has not been enough time for the glow of everything to arrive. There are not enough stars, only about 200 billion trillion of them, an enormous number and still a finite one, far too few to tile the whole sky with fire. And the oldest light of all, the light that does fill every direction you could ever look, has been stretched so thin and cold so far, all the way down to a whisper a few degrees above the coldest possible cold, that it now shines in a colour the human eye was simply never given. All of that is real. All of that holds. Harrison was right. The dark overhead is, more than anything, the dark of a cosmos too young and too sparing to have set itself alight. And yet, more than 4 billion miles from where you are lying, a spacecraft no larger than a grand piano turned its one small camera toward the blackest patch of sky it could find, a dark 10 times deeper than anything Hubble can reach, and the blackness was not quite black enough. There was more light sitting there than every galaxy we have ever catalogued could account for, roughly twice as much. A soft, even, sourceless glow, resting in the void with no name anyone can agree on. And no one tonight can tell you for certain what it is. Perhaps it is the light of stars torn loose from their galaxies long ago, cast out into the space between, wandering now too scattered and too faint to ever gather back into a shape we would recognize. Perhaps it is a whole hidden population of small dim galaxies, uncounted billions of them, sitting just below the threshold of every instrument we have ever built, present in the dark but forever under the line of our seeing. Perhaps it is only dust, closer to home than we guessed, catching a little of our own galaxy's light and throwing it back so softly that we mistook it for the depths. Or perhaps, and this is the thought that stays longest once the others have drifted off, perhaps it is something stranger than any of those. Perhaps it is the faint, slow glow of a particle no one has ever caught, a kind of matter we cannot see and cannot touch and can barely imagine, quietly coming apart out there in the dark, and leaving the smallest trace of light behind as it goes. Perhaps the darkness itself has been carrying a message all along, written in a hand we have not yet learnt to read. You do not have to decide which. That is the true permission folded into all of this, and I want you to take it. You are not the one who has to solve it. Not tonight. Not ever, unless you choose to. Somewhere in the world right now, while you lie here in the warm and the dark with your eyes going heavy, there are people whose whole waking lives are bent toward that faint excess of light. They are building instruments that do not exist yet. They are waiting on answers that may not arrive in their lifetimes, or in yours, or perhaps for another 100 years. You can let them keep the watch. You can set the whole enormous question down at the foot of the bed and leave it there until morning, and it will wait for you, exactly as patient as it has always been. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding. Let the weight of wanting to understand loosen its grip. The dark does not need you to explain it in order to keep you. And if the mind wants one last thing to hold as it slows, let it hold something small and quiet, the way you might hold a smooth stone found on a walk. Think, only gently, of how far this one simple question has travelled. It began with a quiet Englishman named Thomas Digges, somewhere around the year 1576, standing under the same sky you have overhead, and wondering why an endless field of stars was not an endless blaze of light. It passed through Kepler, who turned the very darkness into an argument that the universe must have an edge. It passed through a poet in a library on a winter evening, a man with more grief than instruments, who somehow saw the true shape of the answer before any telescope on Earth could confirm it. It passed through Kelvin, and through Harrison, and through the great slow machinery of 100 careful lifetimes. And it arrived, if it has arrived at all, more than 4 billion miles from any of them, in the year 2021, in the memory of a spacecraft drifting beyond the last planet, still faithfully reporting home. 400 years, from a man alone in a field to a probe alone in the outer dark, and the sky still keeps a little of its secret folded up inside the black. And remember, as the room goes soft around you, what that black is actually holding. Out beyond everything you will ever see with your own 2 eyes, there are something like 2 trillion galaxies, and of those 2 trillion, roughly 9 out of every 10 are too faint, too distant, too dimmed by the long, slow stretching of an expanding universe to ever touch a telescope that now exists. 90% of everything, out of reach. Not gone, not missing, not empty. Simply past the far edge of our looking. So the sky above your roof tonight is not a small thing pretending to be large. It is a genuinely, almost unbearably enormous thing, most of which is hidden from us, and the dark you find between the few faint lights is not absence at all. It is distance too great to cross. It is time not yet finished passing. It is light still somewhere out on its long way toward you, or light that will never arrive, or light already here and shining all around you this very second in colours your eyes were simply never built to catch. That cold and even glow that fills every direction, the oldest light there is, carries something like 40 times the energy of every visible star in the sky combined. It is pouring through your dark room right now, through the walls, through you, and you feel nothing and see nothing, because it sings in a register the body cannot hear. There is nothing to fear in that. It can feel like fear, in the daylight, in a crowded and hurrying mind, the thought of all that hidden vastness, all that unreachable light, all that time. But here now, with your breathing gone slow, and your body finally still, let it be the other thing it has always truly been underneath. Let it be wonder, not the sharp kind that widens the eyes, but the low and steady kind that settles the chest, the kind that comes when you understand, at last, that you were never meant to see all of it, and that this was never a failure of yours or of anyone's. The darkness is not a wall built to keep you out. It is the honest shape of a young and quiet universe, seen from inside a single small life, on a single small world, on one particular night when you happen to be awake to notice. That is the promise hidden under 200 years of hard mathematics and one unexplained glow at the edge of the solar system. Not that the cosmos is cold and empty and indifferent to you, but that it is full, almost past imagining, and gentle in its keeping of you, and old enough and slow enough that its darkness is a kind of mercy, a shade drawn softly over a fire too great for any eye to survive at full brightness. You are not lost in it. You are a small warm window of light inside it, for one short and borrowed age, and the black pressing in around that window is not there to swallow you. It is only the rest of everything, waiting, unhurried, mostly unseen, exactly as it has waited since long before the first person ever thought to ask, and still, at the very edge of everything we can measure, there is a glow no one has yet accounted for. Perhaps it is the light of rogue stars, torn loose from their galaxies and set adrift in the black between them, burning alone in places no map has ever marked. Or perhaps it is the faint, pooled shine of small dim galaxies too far and too faint for any telescope ever built to gather. Or perhaps, and this is the stranger thought, the one that lingers, it is something else entirely, the slow decay of a particle no one has ever held or named, giving up its light so gradually that only a spacecraft 4 billion miles from home, in a sky 10 times darker than anything near Earth, could ever have noticed it at all. We do not know. 200 years of hard mathematics carried us all the way to a sky that finally made sense, and then, quietly, handed us one gentle unexplained brightness and stepped back into the dark. You do not have to solve it. That is the soft gift folded inside all of this, and I want to lay it in your hands before you drift off. None of it was ever yours to carry. You are not asked to hold 2 trillion galaxies in your mind, or to remember that 90 of every 100 of them will never once appear in any image we can make. You are not asked to keep the temperature of the oldest light, or the age of the universe, or the far and frozen year, 1,000 trillion of them from now, when the last star will finally cool and go out. You are only ever asked to lie here, and breathe, and let the size of it pass through you the way weather passes through an open window, touching everything, keeping nothing. Think, one last unhurried time, of how far you have travelled tonight, from a boy's question first whispered in England more than 400 years ago, to a lecture hall in New York on a winter evening, to a small probe drifting silently past the orbit of Pluto, from the surface of the Sun to the coldest number that exists. And through all of it, the sky above your roof stayed exactly as dark as it was when you began. That darkness is not empty, it is layered. It is the finite reach of a young universe, and the first fire stretched thin past seeing, and the 90% we cannot find, and one small stubborn glow we cannot yet explain, all folded together into what looks, from your pillow, like nothing at all. And here is what I would leave you with, gently, as your breathing slows. The dark over your bed is not a warning. It is not a verdict about how small you are, or how little you matter, or how alone. It is an invitation that has stood open since long before anyone was alive to accept it. The universe is not hiding its light from you. It is only so wide, and so young, and so unhurried in the way it lets its fire go, that the light is spread too far and too faint for any single pair of eyes to gather it in one night. You were never meant to see all of it. You were meant to see this. One dark room, one slow breath, one small warm window of light, held inside something enormous and patient and old. So let the last of the numbers go now. Let the galaxies drift back to wherever they came from. Let your shoulders settle, and your jaw loosen, and the whole weight of your body press softly down into the bed as the room goes still around you. There is nothing left to understand tonight. There is only the dark, doing what it has always done, keeping its fire folded and far, watching over one more sleeping world without a sound. You are held inside it, and it means you no harm, and it asks nothing of you but this. Let your eyes close. Let the night be the night. The sky was never empty. It was only holding its fire too far away and far too gently for any eye to fear.